In the sprawling industrial landscape of Shenyang, China, where towering smokestacks pierce the horizon and the rhythmic hammering of assembly lines echoes through the morning mist, a corporate crime was unfolding that would shake the foundations of international automotive partnerships. The year was 2016, and Brilliance Auto, China's ambitious automotive manufacturer, had just crossed a line that would transform them from aspiring partners to intellectual property pirates. What began as a legitimate joint venture with German luxury giant BMW had devolved into one of the most brazen cases of automotive espionage and technology theft in modern corporate history. The company that once dreamed of building cars alongside German engineers was now systematically dismantling those very same vehicles in secret facilities, reverse engineering decades of German innovation, and preparing to flood the market with copies that would undercut their former partners. This is the story of how corporate ambition, national industrial policy, and old-fashioned greed combined to create a perfect storm of intellectual property theft that would ultimately cost BMW hundreds of millions of dollars and forever change how Western companies approach partnerships in China. The seeds of this corporate betrayal were planted in 2003, when BMW and Brilliance Auto first shook hands on what appeared to be a mutually beneficial partnership. BMW Brilliance Automotive, their joint venture, was established with BMW holding a 49% stake and Brilliance controlling 51%, a structure mandated by Chinese law that required foreign automakers to partner with domestic companies to access the lucrative Chinese market. The venture was headquartered in Shenyang, where BMW's 3 Series and 5 Series sedans would be manufactured for Chinese consumers who were developing an insatiable appetite for German luxury. For BMW, the partnership represented access to the world's largest automotive market and a way to avoid hefty import tariffs that made German-built cars prohibitively expensive for most Chinese buyers. For Brilliance, it was an opportunity to learn from one of the world's most respected automotive engineers and potentially elevate their own brand from a regional player to an international competitor. The early years of the partnership were marked by genuine collaboration, with BMW engineers working alongside their Chinese counterparts to adapt German manufacturing processes to local conditions and train Chinese workers in the precise quality standards that had made BMW synonymous with engineering excellence. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly successful partnership, Brilliance was pursuing a far more sinister agenda that would eventually expose the dark underbelly of technology transfer in modern China. Company executives led by Chairman Wu Xiaoan and supported by a network of engineers who had been systematically recruited from European automotive companies began implementing what they internally called Project Phoenix, a comprehensive reverse engineering program designed to extract and replicate every aspect of BMW's proprietary technology. The operation was remarkably sophisticated, involving multiple facilities across northeastern China, where BMW vehicles were completely disassembled by teams of engineers who had signed agreements prohibiting them from working on competing vehicles for 5 years after leaving BMW. These facilities, disguised as quality control centers and research laboratories, housed advanced 3D scanning equipment, metallurgical analysis tools, and computer-aided design systems that could recreate German engineering blueprints with startling accuracy. The stolen intellectual property included BMW's advanced turbocharged engine designs, their innovative suspension systems that provided the smooth ride German cars were famous for, their proprietary transmission technology that seamlessly shifted gears, and even the specific steel alloys and manufacturing processes that gave BMW vehicles their renowned safety ratings. The scope of Brilliance's intellectual property theft extended far beyond simple reverse engineering and revealed a level of corporate espionage that would have impressed even the most seasoned industrial spies. Company insiders, speaking years later to Chinese business publications under conditions of anonymity, revealed that Brilliance had systematically infiltrated BMW's supplier network, convincing parts manufacturers to provide detailed specifications for components that were supposedly needed for legitimate joint venture production, but were actually being used to understand the complete BMW manufacturing ecosystem. The company established shell corporations in Germany, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia that employed former BMW engineers and designers who provided insider knowledge about German design philosophies, manufacturing tolerances, and quality control procedures that couldn't be gleaned from simply disassembling finished vehicles. Perhaps most audaciously, Brilliance even managed to obtain copies of BMW's internal training materials, including detailed technical manuals, manufacturing process documentation, and supplier quality requirements that represented decades of accumulated German automotive expertise. The company's intelligence network was so comprehensive that they possessed detailed cost breakdowns for BMW components, supplier contact information, and even strategic planning documents that outlined BMW's future product development timeline. By early 2016, Brilliance's systematic theft of BMW's intellectual property had progressed to the point where they were ready to launch their own line of luxury sedans that were virtually indistinguishable from BMW models in everything except the badge on the hood. The company's new V3 and V5 sedan models, which rolled off assembly lines in facilities just kilometers away from the legitimate BMW Brilliance joint venture factory, featured engines that produced nearly identical horsepower and torque figures to their BMW counterparts, suspension systems that provided the same smooth ride quality that German engineers had spent years perfecting, and interior layouts that replicated the ergonomic excellence that had made BMW cockpits famous among driving enthusiasts. Even more brazenly, Brilliance had reverse-engineered BMW's advanced safety systems, including their electronic stability control, advanced airbag deployment algorithms, and collision avoidance technology that represented hundreds of millions of dollars in research and development investment. The pricing strategy was devastatingly simple. Brilliance would offer vehicles with 90% of BMW's performance and luxury at 60% of the price, effectively undercutting their German partners in the very market that BMW had entered China to capture. The discovery of Brilliance's betrayal came not through corporate espionage detection systems or whistleblower reports, but through the sharp eyes of BMW engineers who attended the 2016 Beijing International Automotive Exhibition and were shocked to see their own technology staring back at them from the Brilliance display. Dr. Klaus Müller, BMW's chief engineer for Asian operations, later described the experience as surreal and infuriating, watching potential customers examine vehicles that contained German innovations that had taken his teams decades to develop, marketed under Chinese branding at prices that made BMW's legitimate offerings seem overpriced. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Engine bay layouts that matched BMW specifications down to the millimeter, interior components that appeared to have been manufactured using identical tooling, and performance characteristics that could only have been achieved through direct copying of German engineering solutions. BMW's legal team immediately began documenting the similarities, commissioning independent automotive experts to conduct detailed comparative analyses that would eventually fill thousands of pages with evidence of systematic intellectual property theft. The legal and financial consequences of Brilliance's intellectual property theft created a corporate crisis that threatened to destroy not only the joint venture partnership, but also BMW's entire Chinese market strategy. BMW's initial internal assessment, conducted by forensic accountants and intellectual property specialists, estimated that Brilliance had stolen technology worth approximately $800 million in research and development costs, a figure that represented nearly 15 years of accumulated German automotive innovation. The theft had effectively handed Brilliance a complete luxury car manufacturing capability that would have taken them decades to develop independently, giving the Chinese company an insurmountable competitive advantage that they had obtained through corporate espionage rather than legitimate business development. BMW faced the devastating choice between pursuing aggressive legal action that would likely result in the termination of their Chinese partnership and access to the world's largest automotive market, or accepting the theft and attempting to negotiate some form of compensation that would inevitably be insufficient to cover their actual losses. The German company's board of directors, meeting an emergency session at BMW headquarters in Munich, grappled with a decision that would set precedent for how international corporations responded to intellectual property theft in China and potentially influence the behavior of other Chinese companies considering similar strategies. The international implications of the Brilliance scandal extended far beyond the automotive industry and highlighted fundamental weaknesses in the global intellectual property protection system that allowed sophisticated corporate espionage to flourish with minimal consequences. The Chinese government's response to BMW's complaints was diplomatically evasive, with officials expressing general support for intellectual property protection while declining to take specific action against Brilliance, a company that employed thousands of Chinese workers and contributed significantly to the northeastern Chinese economy. European Union trade officials, already concerned about Chinese industrial policy that encouraged technology transfer through questionable means, cited the Brilliance case as evidence that Western companies were essentially being forced to choose between market access and intellectual property protection, a choice that violated fundamental principles of international trade law. The scandal also revealed the limitations of existing legal frameworks for addressing intellectual property theft, as BMW discovered that pursuing litigation in Chinese courts would be prohibitively expensive, time-consuming, and unlikely to result in meaningful penalties, while litigation in German courts would be equally ineffective against a Chinese company operating primarily within China's legal jurisdiction. The resolution of the Brilliance scandal demonstrated the harsh realities of intellectual property enforcement in an increasingly complex global economy, where corporate espionage could be conducted with virtual impunity by companies operating under the protection of national industrial policies. After months of negotiations mediated by German and Chinese trade officials, BMW and Brilliance reached a settlement that required the Chinese company to pay approximately $150 million in licensing fees for technology they had already stolen, modify their copied designs sufficiently to avoid future trademark violations, and implement enhanced security protocols to prevent further intellectual property theft. However, the settlement was widely viewed as inadequate compensation for the actual value of the stolen technology, and did little to prevent Brilliance from continuing to benefit from their ill-gotten German engineering expertise. The joint venture partnership was quietly restructured to limit Brilliance's access to future BMW innovations, with the German company implementing compartmentalized manufacturing processes that would make systematic reverse engineering more difficult, though industry analysts noted that the damage had already been done. Perhaps most significantly, the Brilliance scandal accelerated a broader trend among Western companies to reconsider their Chinese partnerships and develop alternative strategies for accessing Asian markets that didn't require sharing sensitive technology with potential competitors who operated under legal systems that provided minimal protection for foreign intellectual property rights. The case became a cautionary tale studied in business schools and corporate boardrooms worldwide, illustrating how the pursuit of market access could lead companies into partnerships that ultimately strengthened their competitors at the expense of their own technological advantages, forever changing how international corporations approach the delicate balance between cooperation and competition in the global economy.